So to introduce myself, my name is Shivani. I'm a fourth year medical student here in Colorado. I was born and raised in Colorado. I want to thank, first of all, the Friends of India organization in Colorado for setting up this interview and organizing some of the, so that we're able to talk like this. So to preface some of these questions, I'm going to ask you a couple questions about your movie and what it was all about, but I also have a few public health and policy questions that I came up with, specifically comparing some of the US vaccine initiatives to Indian vaccine initiatives, okay? So first off, can you tell us a little bit about the film and what inspired you to make a film on this subject?
Okay, so when COVID struck the world, the pandemic came, there was absolute darkness, There was no hope. People were wondering whether they are going to be alive or not. Now we are happy sitting like this. We forgot about it. Human beings like to forget about tragedies of life, and we want to generally believe that we take life for granted. So when everything was, and if you remember, I think for the first time in the history of humanity, the world shut down. The entire world shut down on almost the same time. And there were dead bodies, there were mass graves, and there were truckloads of dead bodies everywhere in the world. At that time, most of the world thought that India would perish because our health index is very low. We don't have that kind of infrastructure, and we are a heavily populated country with 1.4 billion people, unimaginable numbers, and the density is very high in India. So everybody thought that that India can't survive, and if India had caught, and why the world was interested in India, not because they had any compassion for India, they were interested in infection, the virus spreading in India, because they thought if it spreads rapidly in India, then other countries are also going to suffer because of that. But Indian scientists, Indian leadership, Indian citizens, they took the challenge upon themselves. And India ended up making one of the fastest indigenous vaccines in the world. And normally this vaccine business or medical R&D is done in collaboration with 3-4 different countries, but India did it indigenously. And I think and also when the world was looking at mRNA technology or DNA technology, we relied on tried and tested killed virus vaccine, and turned out to be very safe and effective. And mostly in this, women were involved, and very, very typically Indian kind of women. So I thought it's important to celebrate Nari Shakti and to showcase to the world new India, the modern India, which is science-driven India, which believed that only science can win this war, and we eventually won the war.
Yeah, it is an incredible feat, especially in such a populated country, to have lockdowns and all of these things. It's was a very big challenge for India to accomplish. So. Speaking of challenges, what were some of the biggest challenges you faced in the production and filming of this movie?
Oh, first challenge is personal, because I did my graduation in science, but in physics and maths, and not biology. And this deals with bioscience. So first, to understand what these scientists were talking. Then the bigger challenge was to convert it into very simple layman's non-complex kind of a language. Third is that it's very difficult for people to consume 2.5 hour long movie which is about science inside labs, people wearing masks. Who wants to see people wearing half face covered, So how to make it interesting, emotional, engaging, and create emotions so that through emotions people take away the message of human excellence, and the film becomes inspiring and motivational. So I think that was a very big challenge. And the second was we had to shoot BSL-4 lab, and I hope you know what is BSL-4 lab. Is the highest safety level lab in the world. There are only 6 WHO recognized labs, and India has it in Pune, which is recognized by WHO. So how to recreate that? Then lots of stuff was to be done on animals, and it's not easy to work with animals. You're not allowed to work with animals, especially in India. You can't work on monkeys, it's illegal. Then casting, get authentic casting where all the actors look like scientists and speak that language. And today, when you see the film, you know that it was very difficult. And now the real challenge is to release it and make sure that people come to theaters to watch it.
Oh, okay. All right. So on that line, what kind of research and preparation did you have to do personally or professionally for before the filming began and before production began?
See, my style of filmmaking is I spend years doing research, and I believe in primary research. Okay, which is, see, books can be biased, everything can be biased, but when you interview a cross section of people on the same subject, then somewhere there is something common which runs through whether you like it or you don't like it, whether you are on left or right or opposition or in power, it doesn't matter. Even people who love you or hate you, there's some element which runs common in all their stories, all the interviews. And I pick that common thing because I believe truth is somewhere here. Because everybody experiences the same thing, feels the same thing, talks about the same thing. So in this case, we worked very closely with Indian Council of Medical Research, which developed the vaccine, along with National Institute of Virology, where the BSL-4 is and where most of the work was done. And so we interviewed all the scientists, spent time with them, tried to understand. My biggest problem was that scientists would talk only science.
Yeah.
They won't break into their, and they would speak jargon as if I'm a master of it.
Yeah.
They thought I'm also one of them, which is not true. And also very difficult to break into their personal lives, And I tried, but then we also are smart researchers. We know how to do this.
Yeah. So were you interviewing the actual scientists who were in those wet labs doing the research as well as the policymakers throughout the entire process?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome. So you kind of mentioned about the role that women have played in this research, and the film has highlighted the importance of women in the workforce and what they can bring to these efforts. So from your research for the film, but also personally, what efforts have you seen in India of educating more young females to pursue STEM careers? And where do you think India can improve, or where is there room to grow?
Today, if you see almost on every single indicator, whichever indicator you pick up, India is, I'm not saying India is ahead in the race, but India, in many, many areas where India was never even in the race, today India is in race. In many, many areas, almost every facet of life. But in a whole lot of facets of life which the capitalist world recognizes, for example, GDP, automobile manufacturing, all these big show-off materialistic things, and which also impact your lives, science, technology, aviation, in all those areas. Today, India is not just in the race. India is ahead of most of the countries, and we are in top 3 or 2 or 5. Like startups, we are, I think, 1 year we are second largest, 1 year we are third largest, but very soon we will be number 1 in that. And in every field, if we are growing, becoming strong, it's because of women. Okay, because what happened is somewhere the middle class ensured that their daughters are educated. Okay, and it's impossible for you to find any middle class family in India where daughters are not fully educated. In fact, overeducated, I would say, because in India, girls, even after graduation, keep studying. In research, if you see, PhD, mostly it's girls, and lots of fields of science where men don't take any interest, like marine engineering, fisheries, biosciences. These kind of places, women excel and they do a lot of work. So every sector, if we are growing, I think it's because of women. Today, India has the largest number of women in aviation sector, in finance sector, in banking sector. In fact, I was reading some time back, out of the 9 CEOs of the world's banks were all Indian women. And in media, in entertainment, in fashion, So from glamorous industries to heavy industries, yes, they may not be in automobile manufacturing and all that, because India traditionally does not push women to do a lot of physical work, but now now government is opened up, so they are in army also, space research also. So I think, and also education-wise, in India there is a culture that parents in middle class want their children to go into STEM. So most of the girls are into science. I don't know. See, when I was growing up about 25, 30 years ago, at that time, women would go into arts and boys would go into STEM, but today it's the other way around.
So that being said, India still has a pretty low literacy rate, especially female literacy rate. So as of 2022, UNESCO actually released a report saying that in India, for female literacy, it's actually lagging quite a bit compared to the worldwide average. So worldwide literacy rates are approximately 84%, and India, only 70% of its women are
70?
educated. 70%.
And the worldwide it's 84.
Is 84.
So what is 70% of 1.4 billion, and what is
But
80%?
there is definitely room to improve there,
Of course.
correct? And you were speaking of middle class, but I'm kind of more curious about the social and legislative efforts that are being put for lower socioeconomic backgrounds.
So
in the
India-
villages
yeah,
where
right,
the
yeah.
culture of education isn't as pervasive as
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is in
So the
cities.
women education and women, the number of women in employed force was very low. It always has been very low, because traditionally, if you look at the socio-political ethos of India, then women were treated as burden. Girls, whenever a girl was born, she was treated as a burden on the society, and the parents' only objective was how to get her married somehow and get rid of her. And women were playing a different role. See, it's also very difficult for the West to understand. East and West are different. And first we have to accept there is diversity in the world, and there are
Yeah.
different kinds of societies. And nothing is right and wrong.
Yeah.
I do not subscribe to the kind of ideology which believes that unless somebody is working is empowered. It's
Yeah,
that
no,
I
absolutely
don't
not,
buy
no.
that theory at all. So the whole cultural shift is taking place with globalization, because we are traveling all across IT industry. IT industry,
Yeah.
women have played such an important
Yeah.
role in India.
Yeah.
So, but I believe in last 15, 20 years, especially after 2000, there has been, after the industrial, the IT revolution, there has been lots and lots of push from the government, from NGOs, from society, from different sectors. Media is talking about it. India has been running a very, very important, very crucial, and I think the whole world should study this, a very important program called Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, which is you can save your daughters only if you educate them.
Yeah.
And it's slow and steadily. It has started showing results, because it started 10 years ago. So a girl who was 5 years old 10 years ago is just 14, 15 now.
Yeah.
And the impact of this is seen in villages, in poor, even in slums, and in the poor section of the society. Middle class never had a problem with
Yeah.
education. So basically in lower classes. And I have a feeling in next 4 or 5 or 6 years, maybe when this girl is 21 or 22,
Yeah.
that's when we will see the
See
impact
the
of
impact
this.
of that. Yeah, that makes sense. It does take some time for grassroots efforts to come into play later on. So coming back to the vaccine, as an American, I'm obviously very aware of what happened in the US, and my idea and what I saw of vaccination efforts around the world were definitely based on the media that I was consuming here. So at least in the US, one of the big challenges that we had to vaccinating the masses was the anti-vaccine rhetoric that was spread. And to a certain extent that was pervasive all around the world, including in India. So what do you think India did right, and what do you think it did wrong with in regards to the anti-vaccine kind of rhetoric that was being pushed around everywhere, and which resulted in, states that had high disease burden not getting adequately vaccinating its masses.
See, India did not have the problem which America had. In fact, I was here when the COVID was at its peak, and I was here when Omicron was at its peak, and so I have seen, and I was traveling again, so I was going to every single state. We went to 13, 14 cities in a course of 1 month, so I have seen it closely. America had a different problem because America had a different kind of politics. I don't know whatever that politics was. Maybe some people thought that vaccine is associated with Trump. Some thought it's not. I don't know. I don't know the details. But I found it very strange when people said, he's an anti-vaxxer. I said, what is anti-vaxxer? And how can anybody be anti-vaxxer? But India did not have that problem. India had it for a very short period of time. And this problem came from, obviously, political opposition, because they don't want the government to succeed or take the credit for that success. But as far as COVID management is concerned, I think India perhaps was the best in the world, and the world acknowledges that. In America, I had COVID, and it was taking for your report to come, I think 48 hours to 72 hours, and you had to go somewhere, stand in a queue and fill a form with hand and all that. And that also, my wife had it, and her report, same report, thrice it was changed. First they said you are negative, you are positive, then they said no, you are negative, then they said you are positive, or something like that. And we had to cancel our flight, then rebook our ticket, then cancel, and then rebook just because of that. And that also came after 3-4 days. So here the problems were different. But in India, you could just go to an app and just put the details, and within no time somebody would come to your home, take your swabs. In America, it wasn't possible for somebody to come home and take your swab and leave at about 12 in the noon, and by 5 you had the report in your email or in your WhatsApp. So India had we had a different experience. India, the anti-vaccine campaign was run by political parties and lots of pharma lobbies of the West, because they wanted to make an entry and they wanted to sell their vaccines, and when their vaccines were not approved for a variety of reasons. So perhaps they, and everybody knows there is funding and lobbying and all kinds of things happen. In India, lobbying is illegal, so it's called. So they employ a lot of celebrities and news people, media people to run a campaign, but it lasted for a very short period of time. Okay, but India today has vaccinated, I think, more than 2.5 billion doses, or 3 billion, something like that. I don't remember the exact figure because it keeps changing. So but it definitely is more than 2.5 billion, undoubtedly, which is a big deal. In remote areas, poor people, villages. India is the only country which has also used drone technology to send vaccines in Northeast and in Ladakh. And do you know, most of this vaccination is done by women. They would climb Himalayas for hours, they'll go up, vaccinate, go to a village where there are only 10 families lived, vaccinated them and came back. In fact, if the world has to study, do a case study on human excellence and human resilience and humanity, they should do they should study how India vaccinated its people, and especially uneducated population.
So speaking of this vaccine efforts, so while it is a great feat that India has managed to, vaccinate billions and billions of its population, there was actually a little bit of a delay. So in the U.S., we had the government in November, December of 2020 started public-private partnerships, which significantly accelerated the development and management and production of the vaccines that were founded here, which resulted in about 300 million cases being given to the eligible members by January of 2021. But in India, some of these same partnerships that came out later weren't started until January of 2021. So it kind of resulted in a little bit of a delay in vaccinating the initial doses in India. And I know I personally got vaccinated in the US quite before my family in India did. So
When did you get vaccinated?
I got vaccinated in January of 2021.
Okay.
That was when I first got my dose of my first COVID vaccine. So that has actually been a pretty key criticism of the Indian government, especially from a Western perspective, because when these partnerships came out, there was a significant underfunding, and there was also they underestimated the demand of the vaccines. So the result was in March of 2021, when India was hit with the second wave of COVID, there were incredible shortages of vaccines for its citizens, and it was a devastating, lethal second wave, and the country had to be shut down again. So what are your thoughts on some of these criticisms that the West has in handling and administering the vaccine, and the public health repercussions that were caused by this, the months of delay in delivering the vaccine?
Everybody works, try to do their best. Everybody played to their strengths, and everybody tried to rise above their weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that anybody would sit and say, "Oh, let people die." I'm enjoying it. No, nobody's a sadist. And but India also started vaccinating on 7th of January. We launched our vaccine on the 2nd or 3rd of January, if I'm not wrong. And yes, there were negotiations going on with lots of vaccines from US like Pfizer and Moderna. And there were some issues with Pfizer, and because they like to come like Big Daddy's favorite child.
Pfizer wasn't actually part of this public-private. So in the U.S. it was called Operation Warp Speed. So only Moderna participated in the U.S. Pfizer wasn't ever part of it. And in the U.S., the vaccine that became AstraZeneca, so the Oxford AstraZeneca, was also part of the initiative. So there was a much more expedited delivery and production of the vaccines that wasn't seen in India.
Yeah, obviously, because India is a $3 trillion economy, and America is what, 45-50 trillion. It's the richest country in the world. It's like comparison is wrong. You are comparing a grape with an orange, So first of all, but we came with our own vaccine in January, and which was like one of the fastest in the world. And not only that, we also gifted free vaccines to more than 101 countries, which nobody else did. And I mean, America stopped giving resources to India. So vaccine effort also got stopped.
Yeah.
And then Indian National Security Advisor and Prime Minister intervened, and then Biden again gave it approval so that it came. But we launched it on 7th of January. I think my date is correct, because the approvals were given on the 3rd of January and 2nd or 3rd of January. So by 7th we started. But India India had a different strategy. We believed, because the population is huge. America couldn't have vaccinated population if your population was 1.4 billion people. It was impossible. And how long did it take to vaccinate? What's the population of US?
It's about, I don't know the exact stat, but it's
approximately
300 million, I believe. No.
400 million.
Yeah, 400 million or
400, so which is like India is 3.5 times more than that.
Absolutely.
The population. Okay, and living in remote areas, we don't have that kind of infrastructure like US, And despite that, 30% people, I'm told, are not vaccinated in America because they're anti-vaxxers or whatever. Okay, so it's wrong to compare. First of all, it's creating a debate where no debate exists. India did a great job with their vaccination. The whole world, America recognizes, every scientist in the world recognizes, every virologist recognizes. And as far as the second wave is concerned, it's not because of the vaccination. Okay, India went phase-wise. First, we protected senior citizens. Okay, India has a different emotional and cultural ethos than
It was
America.
the same in the U.S. as well. We
Yeah.
did frontline workers and
Yeah, so we also
over
did the same thing. The
65,
frontline
yeah.
workers we
Yeah.
did first, and then we did senior citizens. Then they opened up, I think 50 plus or 40 plus, I don't remember. Okay, something like that. And then the second wave struck Delta. But Delta came from Europe and it struck everywhere. The whole world was shut down. Again, I don't know about America, but entire Europe was shut down before India was shut down. Okay, so it's not that India was shut down, and it was very tragic. It was a virus which was very strong. It spread like hell, and so it lasted for about 15-20 days. And after that, we opened up, and we never suffered after that. And remember, the third wave when it came, Omicron. At that time, America was shut down. India was not. India was growing and doing business as usual.
Right, but the I guess the question that I'm trying to pose is that because there was this delay, so production or
There was no delay. Where was the delay?
You started the initiative in January, whereas there was
No.
already 300 million
That
doses
is wrong.
distributed.
Absolutely wrong.
I
No.
have articles to show
India
that was not
launched
the
in
case.
January 2021, means started vaccinating. The effort started exactly on 7th of February 2020, even before lockdown came anywhere in the world.
Okay.
The news of COVID came in January. India started working on the vaccine in the month of February 2020, and we finally started vaccinating in January. So you are not fully informed. You are not informed well.
Okay. I'm happy to share some of the articles that I got this information with, but we can move on.
Not articles. I made a film on that, worked with the best scientists and the research. But this is beyond doubt. Nobody,
Yeah.
even God, can't question this. That India started vaccinating its population on the 7th of January 2021.
Okay. Okay.
Right. So before, the partnerships must have happened many months before that.
Okay. Okay.
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit about the vaccine diplomacy that you mentioned about donating the 60 million doses is the number that I have to countries abroad for free when they could have charged for them and they could have, which is absolutely an altruistic and very noble initiative. But I mean, we saw this time and time again that India did struggle with vaccinating its masses. Just the sheer number of people that we had in remote areas. What are your thoughts on this idea of donating vaccines abroad when you have such a high burden of vaccinating your own people due to the challenges of the country?
No, this is not correct. I mean, this is a perception, and I also thought that. So when I started researching for this film, the same thing I would ask, like you, to all the scientists, but this is not true. In fact, India was producing more than what was, because India had a phase-wise vaccination program, and India at that time was producing more than what was required, and so we were sending it to all these countries. But when the second wave struck us, we stopped that distribution, and again it started in October.
Okay.
Once we knew that yes, we can do it, and nobody was prepared for the second wave. Who would have thought that it was a new virus? Even the best of the the Baylor Institute, which is one of the best in the world in Houston, even they wouldn't have known. Nobody in the world knew that a wave like this would come. But when the wave came, India rose up to the challenge, immediately started vaccinating 18 plus population, and which was done so rapidly you can't even imagine.
Okay. All right. So you mentioned this earlier about the resilience of Indian people, and as an Indian American, I'm very proud of my heritage, and I've I've seen firsthand a lot of this spirit and resilience of the Indian people and its culture. So what moment in your film or through your research have you really seen that's highlighted that spirit of the Indian people?
Oh, the film is only about that, so it's not highlighted.
Yeah.
The theme is that you see the film and you will know.
Yeah.
The film is about, actually film also showcases Indic feminism. See, there is Western feminism and there is Indic feminism. And it's very difficult to explain it sitting in the West what that means. See, normally in the West, the feminism came to include women in workforce. Capitalism needs people all the times working. They don't like people sitting at home and looking after children or their husbands or being a housewife. The biggest enemy of capitalism is a housewife. So therefore, feminism came as a political movement. And then because of Hollywood and the American media, it was propagated to the world, and a perception was created that anyone who's looking after children and doing house jobs, so either is suffering from patriarchy, or is not empowered,
Yeah.
and women were made to look like victims, that you are not empowered because somebody is not letting you become empowered. This is a very Western way of thinking. Women are independent, they can take on all their decisions. But in India, it's a little different. And not India, more all the East. That's why you have Eastern culture and Western culture. We look at empowerment in terms of sacrifice, internal characters. So sacrifice, and I think on that terms, Indian women are the strongest. Nobody can sacrifice like they do.
Yeah.
The kind of multitasking they do, it's impossible for the West to even think about that. If you ask any Western woman to, I'm saying who's good and bad, I'm not getting into that comparison. I'm just showing you that why they're two distinct and different. So if you ask an Indian woman to be as independent as a Western woman, they would collapse within 2 hours. Emotional breakdown they would have.
Yeah.
And if you ask a Western woman to do the kind of multitasking Indian women do, they would collapse within no time. So therefore, these are two different things. Indian women I have seen, can also look after children, husband, in-laws, neighbors, socialize, do 100 kinds of things. At the same time, they are excelling, being pilots, scientists, politicians, all those kind of things. So because Indic feminism does not distinguish between these two roles. They think building a house is a woman's domain, and raising children is a woman's domain. Now this is a very debatable and sensitive point, but then it's sensitive because of lack of understanding and being compassionate towards different cultures.
Yeah.
So in that way, I think Indian women are very, very empowered, and that's what the film deals with, this thing, that they kept doing their household work, they kept doing all those kind of things, at the same time they kept making vaccine.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you are correct. The Indian women have a lot of strength that I've seen. My own mother personified, definitely.
Yeah.
So what do you wish the audience takes away from your film? If you could sum it up in one sentence, what's the main takeaway you want?
See, this film, I want to use this film as a soft power for to showcase to the world. There is a kind of a perception about India, that India does not have a scientific temperament. India is not very scientific in approach. And the second is, India can't do it. Everybody, even Indians living outside India, or even Indians living in India, would believe, no, if something challenge comes, they think India can't do it. But slowly, somewhere, we have become a can-do culture country. So this film, in one sentence, I want whoever sees it to believe that India can do it.
That's a wonderful message.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Yeah.